Good evening. This is Junction Joe of the Arctic Agency, and on tonight's podcast, I will be interviewing a pirate abductee on what we called bizarre experiences from being captured by pirates. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is David Johnson, and despite having been gone for just hours, I have lived to tell my tale.
So how did you find yourself being captured?
It started as just a seemingly normal, quiet, and peaceful evening when I was walking on Rocky Beach. This is my usual routine when I'm unable to fall asleep or my mind is very awake. However, this fateful evening, there was a sudden fog that approached very rapidly. I was only walking for maybe 10 minutes before it all fell. However, this fog was a very curious one. Before I had realized what had happened, something in the fog, just offshore, caught my eye, and before I had time to react, I found myself waist deep in the water. This was when things took a rapid turn. Out of nowhere, a small group of people came up from behind and snatched me right out of the water. They schlepped me onto the shore where I casually passed out.
Wow, I'm not sure if any of us ever heard anything as bizarre and sudden as this. Undoubtedly, we are all wondering when and what happened after you woke up.
To answer everyone's question, including mine, I cannot answer, but I do remember that I woke up very cold in a very dark room with very cold floors and walls. I stood up from where I laid, but it was way too dark to see anything. However, at that moment, it suddenly occurred to me that I was taken by pirates. The funny thing was, I wasn't even locked up, but merely just left to sleep. I tried feeling around for things in the room for a potential exit. It appeared that the room I was in was only around 50 square feet. I felt around for a few minutes.
How were you feeling in that moment?
I didn't really have any tense feelings, considering I just woke up and it was pitch dark, but I was obviously very confused because I had no idea where I was, when, or why I was captured and abandoned. I just knew my instinct was to try and find a way out of this quite literal conundrum. After a few minutes of searching, I finally stumbled across an open passage. I slowly started pacing through it.
How long do you think the hallway went on?
At least a couple hundred feet, although it wasn't all straight. All I know is that once I finally came to the end of the hallway, I found myself in a larger cavern with a lagoon. I distinctly remember hearing and faintly seeing shiny drops of water dripping from the stalactites and making drum-like noises on the body of water. I was awestruck by it all, until I was greatly startled by the sound of deep grumbling noises, dull lights coming nearer. I panicked and quickly dodged behind what looked like a few wooden barrels and kept my eyes on the approaching men.
What were some of the things you've heard or seen?
Great question. In those moments, I watched the broody pirates dragging large leather sacks into a small wooden rowboat in the lagoon. It was hard to understand, but I could hear them mumble words like smuggle, trade, and hostage.
Were there more words you heard?
I also heard words like servant and good.
What did these men do next?
Well, if my sight was accurate, I saw them leave the sacks in a single lantern inside the boat and left the cavern through the passage I had come from. I assumed they were probably checking on me. The servant. I knew this was my moment, so I popped out from behind the barrels and dodged over to the boat and hopped in. It was only then I realized I had no oars to paddle the boat, so without hesitation, I got back out of the boat and made the daring decision to enter the passage the pirates had come from. With the lantern in my hand, I started speed walking through the cold rocky hallway as the orange flame of the lantern glowed on the walls. This time, I only traveled maybe 100 feet before I arrived at a fork with 3 different passageways. I knew the odds of me finding a correct hallway was slim, but I decided to travel through the far left passage. I hurried as fast as I could. I went maybe like 50 feet until I came into another cavern, although this one was not as tall and had no lagoon.
Did you find anything interesting?
Oh gosh, yes. When I entered the chamber, I saw rows upon columns of barrels, and inside the barrels were overflowing amounts of coins and bottles. The sight was beautiful, with the orange light of the flame glowing off the shiny silver and gold coins. I walked towards these barrels and grabbed a handful of coins and stuffed them into my buckled pocket in my pants. I looked around and spotted a set of oars hanging from a hook near the right side of the room. I went over to them and took them off the wall. It was then when I heard a stomp noise, like right behind behind me. I turned around immediately and saw a man with a big beard and a black hat staring at me. I panicked, so holding the lantern in my right hand and the 2 oars in the other, I dashed at the man and jabbed him in the shoulder with one of the oars. This caused him to stumble back in pain. I then threw the lantern at the wall and ran away as a fire leaked from the lantern. I ran with the oars at a rapid pace back through the corridor from which I came until I arrived back into the cavern, which was now dark again.
Was the boat still there? Were there any pirates?
Surprisingly, the boat was actually still there when I arrived, and thankfully no pirates were occupying the room. However, I knew if I wanted to escape unharmed, I'd have to get into the rowboat as quickly as I could. So once I found the boat, I slowly got into it with the oars. Unfortunately, it was almost too dark to see where the exit was. However, I was slowly able to move the boat towards one of the walls of the lagoon. After a few nailed attempts at finding an exit by bumping into the rocky walls, a very small current started drifting the boat towards a different wall. It was then I found a wide and short tunnel. I started rowing as fast as I could. However, I was rowing backwards, so I couldn't see where I was going easily. Luckily, I didn't need to because it was still all relatively straightforward. I was rowing for about a few minutes before I started seeing leaks of light at the end of the passage. This gave me immense hope of a safe escape. I paddled for about 30 more feet until I finally found myself floating peacefully over top an intense moonlight reflection shining off the water. It was a beautiful sight. Of course, once I was done being mesmerized, I started looking around at where I was. Right behind my back, I saw an enormous mountain towering over me. Above the mountain, I could see the faint speck of thousands of stars which were partially being dominated by the moon's light. In front of me, I could see far distances because of the moonlight, but I couldn't see land in sight. It turned out I must have been miles away from where I was before the kidnapping.
Did you see any pirate ships?
I didn't see any, but when I rowed my boat around the side of the floating mountain, amazingly, I found a tall strip of ladders, and I rowed right up to them. So still under the moonlight sky, I carefully climbed out of the boat and up the ladder. The ladder went on for probably about 100 feet before I came to a mountain ridge. I was standing there looking out over the ocean under the moon. This was when I saw in a very far distance a dot of orange light. At first it appeared to be standing still, but my conscience told me about perspective. I knew whatever it was coming towards me. I looked around me, but there was nothing on the ridge where I was. It seemed kind of strange that there'd be stairs randomly leading up to a barren platform, but I didn't care too much. After about a minute, I could hear air fluctuating not too far from me. This was when I freaked out. I started waving my arms above my head very rapidly. Desperate to get the UFO's attention, I was extremely thankful the moon made everything bright. Just like I suspected, it was a helicopter. The helicopter started slowing down, assuming because it saw me. I was full of joy. I slowly backed away from the center of the ridge and over to the far back of it. I witnessed the helicopter with its mighty powerful gusts of wind lower down onto the decent-sized platform. In incredible anticipation, I watched as the propellers slowly came to a stop as a guy hopped out of the pilot's seat.
Did the guy say anything?
Indeed. The guy was just as shocked as I was. He asked how it's even possible I could be all the way out here on a desolate island. I told him I did not know, but that I was captured by a gang of pirates. He looked at me very strangely, and without saying a word, he motioned for me to hop into the passenger seat of his helicopter. So I did exactly that. Before I knew it, I was strapped in correctly and the helicopter started up again. I'd never been up close to a helicopter before, let alone flying in one, but the experience was absolutely amazing. The helicopter lifted up off the ridge and took off towards the moon.
Well, we all greatly appreciate you for recounting your very unique experiences, and we hope nothing like this ever happens again to you or anyone else. Next week, I will be interviewing a former lighthouse keeper about a fateful night he barely survived. We thank you for listening attentively. This is Junction Joe of the Arctic Agency, signing off.